Welcome to For Your Consideration, episode 2 of this new UFO cast production. I am Luke, as ever, and my co-host is...
Michael. I am, as there's always Michael. Same as always.
Yes. Hello, Michael. Well, we're into this monthly schedule. Episode 1 went out on New Year's Day, which was a Monday, so I figured we're going to release these first Monday of the month. So if you're listening to this on the UFO cast feed, it will be coming out on the first Monday of February, whatever date that is. And you will be dropping it onto the Tin Dog podcast feed a week later or so.
Probably about a week later, yeah.
So wherever you're listening, happy February. And we are recording this mid-January to try and keep on with this schedule. It's a nice, easy, lazy schedule, this is, I think.
It is, yeah.
We've both had time to watch this month's topic, which, as I said at the end of last month, I'm stuck with weeks because we used to do a weekly thing.
Should we go with last time?
Last time, yes. Last time we did Michael's Night of the Demon, and at the end, it was thrown over to me, we're going to do Paradox, which is a BBC series from 2009. 5 episodes, a sort of police sci-fi drama. And if you're thinking police sci-fi, are we talking something like Crime Traveller?
Couldn't possibly comment.
I think it has a couple of things in common, which we'll talk about, but largely they're very different shows.
Yes.
And I was thinking about this in context, Michael. What do you remember of science fiction for adults in 2009, 10, 11? Because I was trying to put this in context as I was thinking about it.
The thing that comes to mind is, 2009, so that was the year V was born, so I'd been living here about 3 years, so it's way past Buffy, it's way past, I think way past Angel, all of those things had gone. There was a bit of a lull. ITV was hanging around with, Primeval was around then.
I didn't watch Primeval because Primeval happened while I was in Russia, and I kept up with Doctor Who while I was in Russia, and that was about it. And I'd heard that ITV had come up with Primeval as a sort of rival, but I never saw it myself.
Now, hang on. So, if Eccleston's 2005, we're looking at 2009, we're looking at the back end of Tennant, so we've got
the specials year. Yes.
That's a whole
well,
can of worms
okay,
for me.
so let me set the scene for you. So
Sarah Jane Smith.
Yes. So
yes.
With Paradox, which is what we're talking about, was broadcast in November, December 2009. That summer, we'd had Torchwood Children of Earth.
Yep.
So I think the best bit of Torchwood, also incredibly grim. I'm not sure I'd ever watch it again.
My least favourite bit of Torchwood of all time.
Oh, is it? Okay, right.
That's a whole other podcast. We can do that.
But I think The Return of Doctor Who and Torchwood set the scene for the BBC to attempt to do some other sci-fi shows, right? So we had Paradox at the end of 2009. We had The Deep, which was in August 2010. Do you remember The Deep?
It might ring a bell because this started ringing a bell, this Paradox. So, but it was the year I got a new child, so I was a bit distracted.
You were just and then there was Outcasts, which was February 2011. Do you remember that?
Oh, you see, these things are ringing bells, but
right.
I don't know.
So the Deep was the submarine one, which was set up to be there's some aliens down there. At least that's what you thought for the first 2 or 3 episodes. It was James Nesbitt and Goran Visnich and...
Oh, that'll be why I didn't watch it. I will not watch anything with James Nesbitt in it.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay, fine.
Not that he's ever done anything against me, I just don't like him.
It was a submarine exploring hydrothermal vents. It was set up to be there's some alien presence down there. At least that's what you thought for the first few episodes. And then it turned out, spoilers, it was the Russians. Right. So that was sort of 2010. And then Outcast was we're colonising an alien planet, there's stuff going on, there's kind of religious, political stuff, shot in South Africa. That was 2011, right? And
the sort of thing that would be an Apple TV now.
Probably, yes, exactly. Yeah. Right. And I had all these... I watched all of them at the time. I had all of them on Well, interestingly enough, The Deep and Outcast came out on Blu-ray. Paradox never did, although it was all shot in HD. And I had the three of them. So I had the DVD of Paradox and I had the Blu-ray of the other two. And in rewatching the other two, I was just like, no, these weren't very good. Oh. I'm gonna get rid of those. I don't think I even made it through the entire rewatch of Outcast. Okay. So I got rid of those. But Paradox was the one that I kept. And I've rewatched 2 or 3 times, I think, since then. In BBC kind of publicity speak, they were like, it didn't find its audience, which is the reason they didn't recommission it. I.e., and it got panned by the critics. I couldn't find any positive reviews of it at the time, but I don't really care about that.
Trust me, we don't care about that. We really never have.
So that's the historical context. And I was in the process of moving. No, I was still in Bristol. I was living in Bristol at the time.
Okay.
In that kind of period between Russia and moving to Oxford, and I just liked it, and I still like it. It's quite bleak. In fact, I'll throw it over to you now, Michael. Can you have a go at describing the premise of this show, having just been thrown into it this last week?
Okay, so just so that everyone's on the same page, today we're talking about episode 4, but just for clarity, I was also sent episode 1.
Yes.
So because it was the proper homework, I watched episode 4 first.
Right.
And then I went back and I was such a good boy doing my homework that I was actually stood waiting for my takeaway with my tablet out, watching it with a pair of headphones just so that I could catch up in order to make sure that I'd watched episode 1 on time. How do I describe the show? Okay, do you want me to sum up the actual premise?
Yeah, what's the premise that kind of undergirds every episode?
Apparently, there is a scientist who is the most stereotypical moody bloke you've ever cast, in any drama. So much so that you would think he belongs in a Garth Marenghi Darth place, right? And he says he cannot say a line without trying to sound like he's got something else going on, which clearly was in the notes, right? Then you've got somebody from EastEnders who I'm not a big fan of. Again, I'll talk about that in a minute.
Oh, okay.
And she's playing this police officer who gets called in by this apparent whack job, who says, hey, I've got some photographs that came through on my big space telescope. Actual storyline, the guy's working for the MOD or for NASA or for big telescope company. And he's got a secret in the past that you don't know about, to do with giving up a job, which I'm sure you'll find out about. And he is mysterious, loner, expert in things. He works in a lab completely alone. It's a big lab. Nobody's there to help. Nobody ever does any other work apart from one other person who looks a bit shifty, who's a middleman for somebody higher up. Anyway, so this man during
am I detecting that you didn't like this?
No. This is what I sound like when I'm taking the piss a bit. But
yeah,
right, okay. So he's basically looking into solar flares. Now the solar flares go off. Large mass events happen in space, and simultaneously with those, as they cause like the aurora to take place, he receives anonymous downloads of images. These images are small, close up, particularly difficult to comprehend, but they're all of everyday objects. But there's also dead bodies and things like that. And he calls the police, and then he's all mysterious with the police officer, as opposed to genuine, where he would just go, I've got these, please don't think I'm taking the piss, or something weird's, I think something weird's going on. I really thought it was best if I told you so that you didn't think it was me if it came out in the future that I had these images. I don't know where they've come from. Do you want to look into it? So it's basically a retrospective CSI where they've got some photographs of the crime and they have to work out when the crime's happening, what the crime is, or what the event or the disaster. It's a kind of, well, this is why I think you like it. It's a reverse Thunderbirds, because they've got a big catastrophic kind of opening sequence of casualty event where things explode or something happens or some people die, and they have to do it in reverse to try and stop it. Now, this is in episode 1, and this shows you how well it was written. In episode 1, I was convinced they were going to try and actually manage to avert time, to change the course of time. Now, we have to have a big discussion about cause effect, destiny, predestination, and the fact that all of the characters keeps saying, "But you don't believe in God," which seemed to be a very 2009 thing to be going on about. Because now, if this program was made, there'd be a whole, "Hey, where are these images from? Let's find out." And they'd just bypass all of that. Oh my God, she even says, "Where are these images coming from? Is it God? Is it the aliens?" It's like, whoa, you've jumped 15 steps. I suspect it's from someone with a phone who can take photographs. Let's not jump too far ahead. Now, obviously, the science actually makes sense because data has almost zero mass. And in order to time travel, data is the most likely thing to be able to time travel because something with an almost zero mass is capable of travelling faster than things with mass. So that
we're
makes
already
more
getting
sense.
kind of deep into the discussion.
Sorry, I've given this some thought. You give me homework and I'll do the work.
I'm glad I have as well. So this is where I'm going to say this is where there's a slight parallel with Crime Traveller, right?
Yeah.
So with Crime Traveller, they've got a time machine that takes them back into the past, right?
Yeah.
So there's a similar thing in that something's going to happen, and they go back into the past to become part of events, and every time they travel, they get an arbitrary amount of time given to them by the time machine before they have to be back at the time machine, and in which they have to solve the problem. In this, they get the images, and then in every episode, it's literally 18 hours.
There's a big countdown, isn't there? Like 24.
And it occasionally pops up on
the
screen, yeah. So in every episode, it's literally 18 hours from the receipt of the images to when the event is going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's a consistent pattern across the 5 episodes. What changes is the number of images. So in episode 1, you get 8 images. In episode 2, you get 8 images, but they withhold one of them because it's of one of the team dying.
I saw the next time, yes.
Yes, and they come back to that in episode 4. In episode 3, it's 7 images, but one of them may or may not pertain to a future event. And
that's mentioned in episode 4. I was paying attention.
In episode 4, you get 12 images, and then it turns out there's actually 2 simultaneous events going on, so they've kind of got more images to kind of try and figure out what's going on.
Which is the twist.
Which is the twist. And then in episode 5, I can't quite remember how many they get, because I haven't rewatched that in the run-up to this
The only thing that makes no sense is...
The only thing? There's only one thing that makes no sense.
No, sorry, narratively speaking.
Right.
In episode 4... they've got a photograph of let's call him the ginger-haired man. They've got a photograph of a bloke whose name is mentioned, and they've pinned it up in a wall of a nail parlour, and somebody's job is to protect her, and that's clearly part of an ongoing arc.
Yes, so this is where I need to fill you in on what happens in episode 3. So in episode 3, they avert a rape and murder, right?
Oh, okay.
And the guy who was going... So this is where it gets a bit like Minority Report. The guy who was going to commit that rape is the guy you then see again in episode 4.
Yes.
And the sort of image that's out of place is the one that relates to the nail parlour, because everything else in that episode 3 relates to a club. And they successfully figure this out right at the last minute. They stop the guy, but because they stop him, they then can't charge him because he hasn't committed a crime.
Yeah.
And because there's this other image of the nail parlour...
So they're treating it like Minority Report with the precogs. Got it, right.
Yes, exactly. And so... and I've already forgotten his name. Callum is the sort of third wheel of the police team. He's kind of taken it upon himself. And he's the one that, as the series goes on, and with kind of very obvious, like, oh, they're wearing crosses around their necks. He's clearly the Christian dude who believes that God is sending these images. And so as the series goes on, he's gradually kind of like... God sending this, and so I have a part to play. And because that image clearly didn't lead to anything in episode 3, he's like clearly the bad dude, and you see the bad dude watching the parlour at the end of episode 3, which is why he then warns her in episode 4, like, you need to kind of watch out for this guy. Obviously, she gets creeped out by that, and then at the end of the episode, he then attacks her, and as you find out in episode 5, he's raped and killed her. And so... that is the sort of ongoing story arc, which if you jumped in on episode 4, which you did, you would have been like, what the heck is going on with this plot line? So that's one of the ones where you have to kind of watch the series in order to really kind of follow through on what's going on with him.
I actually thought he was the one taking the photographs. And he was working for an external agency.
Okay, so let me fill you in on what is left Basically, everything is left unanswered at the end of the series.
Right, in order to try and get this unknown series to
so Lizzie
Mickery,
who wrote episodes 1, 2, 3, and 5, and who created the series, she clearly had a sort of bigger picture. I haven't been able to find any.
And you showed me the one that she didn't write.
Yeah, I hadn't realised that until.
Okay.
I'm assuming like RTD, she had a big hand in kind of crafting it, given the arc that goes through the whole thing.
Well, definitely, yeah.
So what we do learn is that something shady is going on with the MOD, because the MOD is funding this satellite, and they're trying to work out, well, are the MOD in on it? You've got shady MOD lady who kind of pulls strings when she needs to pull strings, and is the one that's trying to make sure that this whole thing is as secret as possible, because there's the 3 police, there's the scientist, there's his boss, and then there's her. So there's 6 of them that know what's going on, and nobody else is allowed to know what's going on.
That's a big jump at the end of episode 1. Where all of a sudden it's like there's 2 big narrative jumps in episode 1, and that's the second one. The second one is like, right, we've found out what's happened. Everybody settles down. Everybody, the powers come down. Somebody's made it home. Somebody hasn't. That kind of thing. 73 people, all that business, and I genuinely thought shifty guy on the phone was going to stand up, realize something was going on, and it would make more sense to get everyone off the train, shout for everyone to get off the train. I genuinely thought that, so that he would save more people, as opposed to just be a bystander and a character. Anyway, but then about 3 minutes later, that's just a testimony to good writing, because I was totally invested in that point where I was like, this is what's going to happen. They shout, then this curly-haired woman from the MOD turns up and just lays down the law, and you're like, well, where did you turn up from? B, none of this has been mentioned or foreshadowed at all, which I know is very much like real life, where you're just there and all of a sudden something out of the blue happens, and that's the nature of real life versus a bit of narrative. So that's understandable. And the first one is is it Tamsin? The main woman.
Tamsin Outhwaite.
Yeah, Tamsin.
Her character.
When Tamsin Outhwaite says to her boss, "No, don't call in a terrorist squad. I'm going to sort this myself." And you're like, okay, that wouldn't work in an American drama either, because you're dealing with explosives, right? And if something goes horribly wrong, like an explosion, your career's over. Sorry, you're as a police procedural, that's where it goes a bit shaky.
Oh, I mean, as a police procedural, it's absolutely shocking. I mean, if we should get Andrew Smith to watch it and be like, comment on it.
He'll just cry.
Because in episode 2, Ben punches another copper in the face because he makes some kind of suggestion that, like, the other 2 are sleeping with each other. And, it's just like, well, you'd probably be out of work pretty quick if you did that.
Yeah.
Anyway, did you enjoy it?
You know what?
Is the question.
My wife said, "Oh, you've got homework. Should we watch it now?" And we put it on, and she was asleep within 10 minutes. And I kept going, and I made it through. But I made it through because it's set in Manchester, which is where I was living, and it's where she's from. And I was going, that's the Arndale. Oh, that's I've got a picture of that location on my wall in the hallway. It's a painting by Lowry, Ellis Lowry, of the big central what was a park but has now got a big bus station and things like that. But that's actually one of the locations that they do. And then I was like, oh, isn't that nice? And because I'd only been away from Manchester 6 years at that point, 7 years, and it was just still fresh. And obviously, with my wife being from Manchester, we do go back quite often, so it was kind of nice to see the locations. Oh, need to ask this, right? So, BBC drama, filmed in Manchester. There's a science business in Manchester, which is kind of cool. That's the science building that's next to a river, I believe. It's that would be a river.
Do you know what the building is in real life?
No.
In real life, it's the Imperial War Museum North.
Is it? Right, okay.
Yes.
That makes a little bit more sense.
And they clearly went, that looks like a futuristic science laboratory. We will film the exteriors there.
All making total sense. However, the one thing that doesn't make sense at the very end, it says BBC Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I don't get that either. But
Why
clearly it
wouldn't why wouldn't you film it in Ireland if you're BBC Ireland?
I don't know. I don't know how it ended up being produced by BBC Northern Ireland and shot in Manchester, but that's apparently how it
was
the
my
structure of the whole
biggest
thing.
mystery of the whole thing.
Yes. Well, I'm glad. But, okay. So I texted you after I'd watched episode 4.
Yes, you did.
And I said, this one lands differently now that I'm a father.
It does.
I mean, it's still... So I think I still enjoy this series, but I've realised, rewatching it this time, how bleak the whole thing is.
Right. Are we going to give away spoilers?
Well, I think we have to give away spoilers.
Well, you know what?
Properly.
Let's embrace it and just go for it. Right.
So I think we'll say to people, if you're interested, based on the conversation we've had so far, if you're actually interested in watching it with no spoilers beyond what we've already said, do go away and
press
watch
stop,
it. I think you can
come back. We'll
press stop, come back. The last I looked on Amazon, you can get an imported DVD. I've got the British DVD, but that doesn't seem to exist anymore. You can get like an imported DVD from somewhere, or I think you can buy it on Amazon Prime for like £5 or something.
I'm going to check eBay
or whatever. So go and do that. Anyway, so spoilers. Episode 1, they don't stop the future. Episode 2, they do change the future. They rescue the kid who's going to drown, and Ben doesn't die, because one of the images suggests that he's going to die. Episode 3, they do stop the sexual assault, but then obviously they don't arrest the guy and he goes on to commit another sexual assault. Episode 4... they are faced with this decision at the end of the episode. This is partly why I chose this episode, where they have to choose between 2 rescues because there's only one fire engine that's going to get there quick enough.
Aerial
with the right
platform,
ladder.
which I was expecting to come down from a helicopter for some stupid reason. Yeah.
It's basically it's a fire engine with a big ladder.
Yeah.
And they have to choose at the last minute between the 2 locations. So they save one woman from burning to death, but they don't save Sacha Dhawan from falling off a building. And then episode 5 ends on a cliffhanger, and you don't quite know what has happened. So to fill you in, Michael, do you want to watch the rest of the episodes?
You know what? I might, but I don't care. You can spoil it for me now anyway.
Okay. So episode 5...
Can I just say, it is available on eBay as well.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, cool.
Episode 5, the events of episode 5, and as I say, I haven't rewatched this, so I'm going to watch this in the next week. But my recollection of episode 5 is that... the images lead them to a school shooting.
Okay.
And there's several kids are going to die, and the hand that's on the gun is Rebecca's hand.
Right.
So you're like, oh, what's going to happen? Now, one of the things that I like, you talked about Christian. I think it's interesting that they chose to call the scientist Christian King. You could probably read any number of things into that. But anyway, he goes from being whack job into the first episode, as you said, wacko, like he's more aloof than he needs to be.
Yeah.
And he plays that role throughout the series of being the sort of slightly autistic scientist, doesn't know how to talk to real people. The Flanders and Swan kind of like, H2SO4 professor, the square root of pi is your good lady wife. We can't talk to scientists, they can't talk to us, that kind of thing. But he gradually gets more involved, because he's this sort of observer who gradually wants to get more involved. And at the end of episode 4, you see him weeping because they haven't managed to stop the guy dying, right? So he's clearly gone from being kind of like aloof observer to kind of like properly emotionally involved, wanting to stop the future from happening. And so he's there with Rebecca at the end as they're trying to stop this school shooting. And what happens is, and the reason that the image shows her hand on the gun is she, at the last minute, pushes the gun aside, but then he is seemingly shot.
Right.
Well, he is shot, yeah. So he's shot rather than the kids. So the series ends with him lying...
Who's going to do the shooting? Just some new character?
Some kid at the school, and one of the kids involved is Ben's daughter, so the stakes are raised for him, because we've heard about his children earlier in the series, but we haven't seen them.
We saw him put them to bed during the power cut in episode 1.
Did we? Okay, right. So one of them, there's stuff going on at school. The wrong kids. She's in with the wrong kids. Anyway, one of them is going to shoot some kids. There's a sort of standoff in the school. Rebecca gets in, pushes the gun aside. The kids who are dead in the image are saved, but Christian is lying shot on the floor. And then the series ends. And one assumes that if a series 2 had happened, it would have been revealed one way or the other, whether he was dead, whether he survived, and then they'd have had another series of like, oh, more images have come down, da 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 da.
Yeah.
So that's where it ends, and obviously it wasn't recommissioned, so that is the end of the story as far as the TV goes, and you're left to kind of decide
you
what
never
you think
find
happens.
out where they're coming from.
You never find out where the images are coming from. You never find out what the MOD knows or doesn't know. These 5 episodes are what you've got. So really, you're left with these 5 plots of will they save people, will they not, and half the time they fail. The other thing that the other big spoiler for episode 5 is that Callum, having failed to protect the lady in the nail bar, takes things into his own hands and murders the rapist.
Oh, right, okay.
So,
like you said, considerably darker than Crime Traveller.
Yeah.
Right,
so Cop takes things into his own hands, murders the guy who's got away with rape and murder, and so no doubt Series 2 would have had repercussions for him as to kind of whether he was found out or not. But again, there wasn't a Series 2, so we never find out.
That's fair enough. That's a lot of seeds. It's nicely set up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure I did read something somewhere that she had a plan to do sort of like 2 or 3 seasons. I haven't been able to find that again this time round. The BBC does still have a page for Paradox where there's like little interviews with the cast and then a space scientist talking about the reality of wormholes, which is a very tiny element of the plot.
Yeah, and also he mentions wormholes in a kind of that's something the audience will have heard of, which is what they did in the Marvel movies. They do a whole thing where they had to get a scientist in to go, right, we've said wormholes too many times in our films. We're having a bit of a problem. And the scientist just goes, well, call it an Einstein-Rosenberg bridge. And they go, oh, that's great. Yeah, let's do that. So there's actually a line in Thor where she says, it's an Einstein-Rosenberg bridge. And then because they like to dumb things down, they go, do you mean a wormhole? Yeah. So the whole thing just goes around because that's something we all know about, a sort of reverse black hole thing. Nobody really knows truly what they are, how you'd manage to manufacture one, but everyone kind of gets it. And that's fine. But like I said, the lower your mass, the more likely you are to be able to travel. So data makes more sense. But the way that you've got this incredible computer and it still makes the dial-up modem noise while it's getting its images is nice. So clearly the images are being sent. They're logging in, and it's a closed system. You can't, because they actually make a point of saying it's a closed system and nobody can get past the firewall without permission, and it has to log in, and there's a load of extra security features, which is why they have to print the pictures out on paper and carry them around the paper ones rather than having it. Sorry.
Well, there's also this is why we need to talk about this as well. This happens at a very particular moment in time. So this is just on the cusp of smartphones, but it's pre-smartphones.
Yeah.
So there's a bit in episode, and everybody's got those phones that operate by flipping. It's not a flip phone; it's a slide phone. You know, where you slide the screen up and the buttons are underneath.
Yeah.
And this is a very specific moment in time, as the sort of end of like fancy mobile phones before smartphones came in.
It's the back end of the Matrix phones where
exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a bit in episode 3 where Ben goes off to do some actual policing because he's fed up with the whole like stopping the future thing, and he gets somebody to send him an e-fit of a villain that he thinks did it, and so he basically waits outside this guy's place and he waits for his phone to ping, and this little JPEG pops up on his screen. Do you remember screens that size?
Oh yeah.
And it's the little JPEG. He talks on the phone. He's like, "Can you send over the e-fit?" And so it gets pinged across, and he then looks at it and goes, "Oh, that's the guy I thought it was," and he goes and beats him up. But it's that thing of like this: the phones could do images, but they weren't smartphones yet.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So it's kind of that very specific moment in time. And yeah, there is that question of like, well, does anybody else have access to the satellite? Could anybody else be feeding the images? Who is feeding the images? Where are they coming from?
Yeah.
And the whole kind of like, is it a conspiracy? And there's a whole thing with the scientists of like, there's no purpose in this because all the team are kind of like, well, why are the images being sent? What is our role? Should we be stopping this? And he's just like, no, they're just happening. You know.
Yeah, but
there's nobody's trying to get you to do anything.
Yeah,
and then he gradually changes his mind as the series goes on.
Yeah, for me, because obviously I bypassed the whole who's sending. No, it's not aliens. It's clearly someone on the ground taking photographs. So I was of the opinion, because she says, "Can your satellite be taking the photographs?" And I'm thinking, well, not really. They're sideways one. The one that annoyed me was the paper cup, which clearly was not at the epicenter of the accident. He'd thrown it out of the cab window about 15 minutes earlier, so it wasn't actually connected with the event.
Well, and so the question is it possible that one person is taking pictures of all these different things?
Well, that's what I'd created in my head. I thought Gingerhead Man,
who takes the picture of the... For example, in episode 2, one of the images is of a boy who's drowned in a garage pit. You're like,
yes, I saw that in the next time bit, yeah.
Yeah, so like, who could have taken that photograph? There's like, nobody obviously could have taken that photograph. Obviously, we know that the TV production company have taken the photograph for us to be able to see it, but in universe, some of the photographs are just like, well, who could have taken that photograph?
See, I'd not made it that far.
How could one person have taken all of these photographs? You know, which is when you're kind of then then you kind of into the kind of God's eye view of things.
See, I was thinking they were more like journalistic photographs of the scene of crime, and because they then existed, then they'd somehow been selected and sent back. Yeah. But clearly, that's not the case.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it would. I would. That's the intriguing thing, because the series ends before any of this could be revealed, without kind of contacting the writer. I mean, she's on Twitter. I did almost think, I could message her and say, like,
what's good?
Could we interview you about what your plans for Paradox were? Because and it's possible she's been interviewed.
She probably will not reply if she hears this.
Well, I don't know. But yeah, so I think it's one of those things where you can fill in the blanks. You know, as we were talking about the end of The Prisoner, like not free for all. Fallout is what you make of it. Well, with this, because it was cancelled before it could really get anywhere, this is what you make of it. Like, you can decide. You can say, well, I think it's God. I mean, if it is God, it's a very weird way of communicating. But then, hey, half the course really with God. Or is there something more clandestine going on? Is there somebody collecting these images, and why? And the thing that... Well, we should talk more specifically about episode 4, but I want to talk about episode 2 before we go on. There's a very clear thing in episode 2 that what happens only happens because they interfere. Right?
Oh, right. That was going to be one of my questions. Yeah.
So some of the images relate. So basically, what happens is that this guy kidnaps this kid and hides him in a garage pit, and because somebody's nicked a manhole cover, the garage pit then floods, and the boy drowns. But this wasn't the intention of the villain, right? The villain was presumably we don't know what the villain was going to do with this kid. Because they go and interview the villain, they spook him, he gets an asthma attack, goes into town, gets himself an inhaler, and while he's there, he gets run over and dies.
Oh, right. So it's kind of like a marble run cause and effect thing.
Yeah, so that's why. Yeah. So the reason he's not able to go back and see the boy is because he's dead. But he's only dead because they interfered. Right. But the image of him dying is what sets them on the course in the first place. So there's a whole kind of cause and effect thing and in fact she says that in one of the episodes. She's like, is my investigation causing these things to happen? And the scientist is like, you're thinking about this in the wrong kind of way. But that is one of the questions that the series asks. Like, if they didn't do stuff, if they hadn't seen the future, would the future that they it's the opposite of the Doctor Who thing of where Pertwee says, so free will isn't an illusion. With this, free will is an illusion because she's trapped into the cycle of cause and effect that is instigated by the bootstrap paradox of being sent the images. Without the images, the timeline would have continued in direction A. Yeah, it would. But then at the end of that episode, the image of Ben dying doesn't happen.
Oh, that was my question. If they change history, does the photograph change just like Back to the Future?
No, because that's why in episode 4, where he's discovered that there was this image of him dead, he asks the scientist, "Where am I dead?" And the scientist goes, "Well, if this interpretation is correct, there's a parallel universe that's created the minute you didn't get electrocuted. And the image that you see of you being dead comes from the parallel universe where you died." So there's an implication that in the situations where they change the future, they've created a parallel timeline, and the images have come from the timeline where they didn't stop things.
Okay, so here's the logical extension of that argument with time travel.
Right.
And it'll upset anyone who lies in bed at night thinking about these things like what I do. It means that every decision you've ever made in your entire life has the outcome where you die in the next 2 minutes, the outcome, right? An outcome where everybody around you dies or is maimed or something horrible happens or the house burns down and that's happening constantly at every moment across the universe without you even knowing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It also, and this is something that I've thought about, and maybe this is me overthinking. It also has quite stark implications for morality.
Yes.
Because, and I see whether you agree with me on this, but if that is the case, if every time we make a choice, or every time we act in one way or another, the alternative is played out in another reality, okay, that means that every time you do something good, you are condemning another version of yourself to not do the good thing, or to do the bad thing. Or,
however,
if you flip it the other way, anytime you do something bad, you know that you're causing another version of yourself to do a good thing. But it means that ultimately all of our actions cancel out, and that morality is bunk. Unless, of course, you say, I have no moral responsibility for what goes on in any of these other universes, and I just have to focus on the universe that I am in, and don't care about all these other places that are equally real, but which I will never have access to.
They're big enough and ugly enough to look after themselves.
Yes, but the point being that because of causality, if you do one thing, somebody else does another thing, and it's almost like by you choosing to do the good thing, you're causing another version of yourself to do the bad thing.
There's the philosophical argument that kicks in at this point where, at what point do I stop being me in these alternative universes because I've made alternative choices?
Well,
at what point do the choices stop me from being me? It's on a microscopic level, it's every single decision, no matter how different.
Yes.
Because there's a sliding scale between me, killing the next person I meet with a knife, and me just going, whatever.
Yeah.
There's a big scale in there.
Yeah.
And
there's a big scale. Yeah. Well, then again, that's addressed in episode 4 in that conversation that Ben has with Christian. He says, where am I dead? And so he says that there are other versions of me, and Christian says, yes, for whatever that's worth, or something like that. Basically implying that it's not actually that important to the here and now that there are other versions of ourselves.
Or even if it matters, does it matter that it matters? Yeah.
But I think the minute that you... Yeah, the minute you start thinking about it, and like you say, you're thinking about, well, how many decisions down the line before that other person really isn't you at all?
Yeah.
Or the sort of the weird possibility that you make one choice that splits off into the two of you, but then from there on in, you make the same choice. I don't know. It's very complicated and mind bending.
Yeah.
And
so, but at its core. At its core, with this particular program, like you've said, the thing it bears the closest resemblance to is Minority Report.
Yes.
Because they've got a precog in the sense of the images. Now, the issue with the Minority Report is the three precogs. One of the precogs is slightly out of the other two because she has witnessed a crime. I'm not even going to spoil that film. Because it's the best Tom Cruise film, in my opinion.
Oh, it's very good. I love Minority Report.
Yeah.
It's also very different from the short story.
Well, yes.
Because in the short story, it turns out that each of the precogs sees different things because of the fact that each of the precogs sees different things. And so the second precog is reacting on the fact that the first precog has seen something, and the third precog is acting on the fact that the first two have seen something. Whereas in the film, it's more like they're all seeing the same event at the same time, but
except one of them is watching the reconstruction.
The one sees it. One potentially sees it slightly different because she's more gifted. Anyway, So but whereas with this, it's literally just it's impersonal in that there isn't that whole kind of like brain chemistry thing going on.
It actually has more in common with a film, and I don't know if you've seen it because not a lot of people have seen this one. Paycheck. Is it Paycheck? Payday?
I have seen Paycheck, yes.
Yes.
Which is another Philip K. Dick story.
Indeed.
I haven't seen it for a long time.
Yeah, but basically, he has the precog information, sorts out some things that would help, and then has his own memory wiped, so he doesn't know that he set everything up to save himself.
Yes, he leaves himself... He's like, rather than get paid my money... He's like, I'm going to leave myself some clues as to what I was doing before I got my memory wiped, and then I have to kind of work out why all these people are trying to kill me.
Yeah. And why he gave away his $5 million.
And why would I give away my however many million? Yes. Yeah. And then I honestly can't remember why that was.
It was to attract his own attention. It was to make...
Yes. Yeah. The film got panned, but I seem to recall quite enjoying it.
I think it's a great film to watch on TV, but you wouldn't want to watch it in a cinema.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. I watched it on Love Film when I had a Love Film subscription. Well, I realise we're a long way into this, and we haven't really talked about the actual plot of episode 4.
To be fair, I think we have, because it's the same setup as the others, but the twist in this one, because you have to have a different take on the same basic storyline as it progresses. So it's episode 1, here's the setup, we fail to change things. Therefore, logically, in episode 2, here's the setup, we managed to change things, here's the consequences. Episode 3, like you said... something about the actual consequences. In this one, it's the same setup from an audience point of view. There's going to be something different going on, and the thing that's different is there's 2 incidents, and they have to figure that out, and they have to make a moral decision as to who to save. And the logical decision is you sit, right, okay, this is where I come across as slightly more heartless than you would think. This is me acting out of character, I suppose. Tamsin's character saves the person she's standing closest to so she doesn't have to deal with the emotional fallout, and from a very cold point of view, she saves the person who will look after her grown-up kid because the other person is insured because it's their job, and that child will then have loads of money because they were already poor.
Wow, I mean, I hadn't thought it through like that.
And that's because I watched this late at night and I was full of it. I was in a dark place.
I mean, so the 2 scenarios for those who are listening to this who haven't watched it. You've got crooked travel agent sets fire to his own premises without thinking about the consequences of it, and it turns out there's a woman is going to burn to death in the flat above. Or you've got Sacha Dhawan's character who does building maintenance. He's tired because he's got a new baby. He's just arranged a flight with said crooked travel agent, which is how it all kind of comes together, to take him and his wife to Hyderabad because they're originally from Pakistani origin. Apologies to anybody from India or Pakistan. I am sorry that I put Hyderabad in Pakistan when it's actually in India. And Sacha Dhawan's parents are from India, so sorry about that. Anyway, back to the conversation. Because that's where her mum is. And he's working triple time shifts to pay for it, but obviously he's really tired. Something goes wrong with his main rope, and then the carabiner on his support rope snaps.
I genuinely thought, because I was nodding off a bit, I genuinely thought that he was doing the extra shifts in order to bring the mother over from Hyderabad to Manchester to be with them. Because keeping grandparents away from kids, we both know that's physically impossible.
Yeah. Well, it is. Yeah, it's a tricky. I mean, I suppose the thing that rang true. I mean, apart from the fact that they hadn't quite shot the baby from an angle where you could tell that the baby in the picture wasn't crying, but the sound they dubbed on was.
Yes.
The thing that rang true was the fact that they were absolutely tired. The mother was at her wit's end. And they had that moment where, because they go and visit them as the police, and the mother is immediately kind of confessing because she thinks social services have been sent round.
That's very realistic.
And then the copper reassures him and goes, "Is it your first?" And he's like, "It gets better." And you suddenly go, "Oh, hang on. He's got a family somewhere that we never see. You know, there's all these kind of little character moments.
Yeah. No, it's tremendously well structured because there's a lot of stuff in there which comes from the characters having a very precise pre-written background. Oh, sorry. On the subject of which,
yes,
episode 1, where he's described. Sorry, I need to get this out of my head now, and I do apologise. The shady scientist guy turns to Tamsin and says, "Well, I could just stand up and snog you, and then we could end up making love." And I'm thinking, "Whoa, what are we watching here, mate?" And I'm just saying, those lines would not be in a script now. It's like,
wait, I mean, he's just slightly socially inept at that point, isn't he?
There's socially inept and it's just damn creepy, right? And
well, yes, no. The episode 1 does play.
Right. Sorry, I just needed that's in my notes. So I needed to bring it up. Yeah,
that is the slight kind of weird creepiness because, and again, you haven't picked up on this because you haven't seen episodes 2 and 3. But obviously, at the end of episode 1, Rebecca and Ben.
Yeah.
So he's DI, she's DI, he's DTS. Yeah. They sleep together
because they used to be in a relationship because he had keys.
Yes, they used to be in a relationship, and then in episode 2, it's like I love you. Oh, but it's not enough, you know. And there's the sort of unresolved sexual tension between them that goes on for the rest of the series, and then there's the kind of like the relationship that she has with Christian. You know, what is that? It's a very weird relationship. That what is that? You know, like does he fancy her? Is there, you know, and obviously she's then kind of gutted at the end of episode 5 when he gets shot, and you're like, well, how would that have resolved in the future? Right.
Sorry, so series? We're setting this up for the listener who's not going to watch this. We've got these 2 definite events which are happening, and apparently there's only one massive ladder because Fireman Sam's off doing something else.
Well, or there is another one, but it's not going to get there for 10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
By which time it will be too late because he's about to fall literally in the next few seconds.
Because both of the events happen at the same time.
Yes.
And there's not some elegant solution where one stops the other or where they can solve it or anything like that.
No. And that's it. I mean, and I think it's one of these things where you're like, I think you can see it 2 ways. You can see the whole thing as a massive contrivance because the only thing that links the 2 events is the fact that Sacha Dhawan's character has bought a plane ticket from the travel agent who then sets fire to his shop. Right, that's the kind of link between the 2.
Oh, there's another one.
What's the other link?
They're both going to die at the same time. Both of the deaths.
Yeah. They're both
of the
deaths
at the same time. Simultaneously going to occur. She's going to suffocate, and he's going. So they both are the event happens at the same moment.
Yes, exactly.
So if the death is what causes the images to travel, then that would be, I don't know.
Yes, yeah, there's the moment where the other kind of undercurrent of the story is that as often happens in cop shows, you've got one crime agency interfering with what another crime agency are doing.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's the fact that the money from this robbery is going to be laundered by the dodgy travel agent. And so they start following him, and then they get apprehended by Soccer, who are like, hang on, you've just blown our gaff. And then it's only because the MOD woman comes in and pulls the strings that they get released to carry on their investigation. And it's that, which is, I always find that quite funny. And I'm like, I don't know how real any of this is. That,
right,
how often do
imagine MOD woman didn't turn up.
Yeah.
And therefore they're still under caution. Sasha's character would still plummet, but the other police force, which is supposed to be observing dodgy man with the cash, they're not there. They're not observing him.
That is the weird question. Is like, why are they not following him?
Because if they were observing him in his shop, they would have been able to interfere with the rescuing of the man immediately.
Well, they would have potentially been able to stop him torching his shop. So there is the question of like, well, what were they doing? Like, why is their plan to let him go? Because if they'd followed him back to his If they hadn't been interfered with and they'd followed him back to his travel agency,
Yeah.
they would have known that he was the manager of the shop that sold the ticket to.
Well, yeah.
But that's the fact. That's the thing they don't discover till the end, because when they go and interview him, he's hiding in his office and won't come out, and so they don't make the link between dude they've already seen with the tie and travel agent that we went to see about the ticket that the other guys bought.
Right. Okay. So
it's
you know what? It wasn't. My wife disliked it immensely. I was all right.
After 5-10 minutes, she disliked it immensely.
Yeah, but she didn't like it because me and her have got a thing where we just don't like Tamsin Outhwaite, and we just think like she's phoning it in. Now, she's either a brilliant actress who's just so understated that she looks like it's effortless, or she's not really. It's just she's never done it, and it's kind of a thing we've got going on. There's her, there's Nesbitt. I just don't like as performers, not big fans.
So here's the question for you.
Yeah.
Was your first encounter with Tamsin Outhwaite in EastEnders?
Yes.
Because I think there's a stigma, isn't there, about soap actors.
Well, there was at the time,
things.
But I've always held them in very high regard, personally.
Right.
So it wasn't that, because there's some people who I've seen in stuff, and I've seen stuff in years later, and I've just been like kind of so impressed. I mean, for example, the guy who played Fred Elliott, who's in The Visitation, he's also in like the Napoleon Wellington Waterloo film, and he totally steals the moments he's in, because he's such an incredibly powerful actor. But in Coronation Street, he was a jokey character. But you're aware of how good they are.
He's very good in Yes Minister as well. As one of the civil servants.
Perfect, yeah. And like Julie from... There's a more Coronation Street. It was just her. I don't know.
Oh, Julie Hesmond.
Yeah.
I don't know how you pronounce her name, because it's one of those ones that's not spelt like you pronounce it.
She's always brilliant in everything she's
very
in.
good. Yeah,
right,
she's very good.
And that's just fine. Anyway, so I've got very high regard for soap performers in general, because it's very hard hours. They're given a variety of characterization that just doesn't even lock together or contradicts itself, and they have to play it well. Because you're sitting there as an audience member going, well, you wouldn't do that because of something that happened 4 years ago, and they've got to work with that, and they know they're actors. They live in the characters. It's just. That's the reason we've never really. But I thought, no, I'll put that on hold. I'll watch this and it's fine. And I've got to watch out for the some people who were in Doctor Who, and so I've got to do that. So that it was, narratively speaking, I've got issues, but it's fine. It really wasn't a chore, and I enjoyed it enough to go, I'll watch episode 1.
Okay, good.
So yeah, it wasn't a bad thing.
But you haven't really changed your mind on Tamsin Outhwaite as an actress.
Not really.
Okay.
She was all right. She was all right. That was it.
Okay. Did you like the other performers, the other regular cast?
You know what? I kind of put my brain in neutral and just went, show me the plot. The scientist bloke, I didn't engage with at all, but I wasn't really supposed to. But I'm supposed to find geeky characters like relatable, and I didn't. I just found him a bit creepy. He's not in a fun way.
Yeah, he's a caricature. I think he is a caricature. To be honest, I think they're all of the characters are not. Yeah, they're not. You don't watch this for the characterization, I think, is what I would say, because you've got creepy scientist guy. You've got driven DI. You've got doesn't do it by the book DS. And then you've got the homicidal Christian that you discover he's homicidal by episode 5 when he kind of takes the law into his own hands and bumps off the rapist. So
in my head, I was creating narrative, and I had him down as the main protagonist in charge of image sending.
Yeah.
And
so, but then it turns out no, he's not. So should we round it off with Spot the Doctor Who actor?
Why not? Well, okay, I'm going to start off with Yasasha, because you've got the Master. He's the most obvious one. We're not even bothering going. That's fine. There you go.
Yes, so Sacha Dhawan as the Master, and obviously Waris Hussein in An Adventure in Space and Time.
And here's the important bit.
Yeah.
Another reason I don't like Tamsin is she's in one of my least favourite episodes of Doctor Who.
Yes, she is, isn't she?
She is, yes. And you know what? That episode would have been fine if the Cybermen hadn't run.
That's your only problem with it. I think there's a whole lot else that's wrong with it. But
that is where it starts.
Yeah.
That is my major problem with that episode. And then after that, I start looking for more problems, and they grow. But that was the beginning. Was like, why bother to run? What's the point?
Yeah. Who else did you spot?
Okay, they were my two. But clearly, right, main detective bloke who's Scottish.
Yes, Mark Bonnar.
Mark Bonnar is, as far as I'm concerned, the 11. Because on Big Finish, he plays one of the biggest, one of the best, the single best creations they've ever come out with. He is a Time Lord who has a regenerative problem. All of his previous incarnations are present at the same time in his head. He's a literally split personality.
Oh, right.
With 11 personalities. All of them mental, literally, and I work in mental health. And apart from number 8, who's a nice one, and they all repress number 8. They do the voices. There's been about 5 different actors play the parts of different ones. Right. And I think the last one is anyway, I won't go into this. The 11's a brilliant character. Yes. I know he was in the one where they're all made of silly putty, the squishy face ones.
Yes.
But as far as I'm concerned, he's that, and for the Jerry Anderson crossover of fans amongst us, he's also Commander Koenig in Space 1999.
Yes.
So that was the big one. Now,
who else did you spot?
Fourth one, I really convinced myself that Gingerhead Man was Pete Tyler, was Sean Dingwall, and he's not.
Yeah. No,
but
he's not.
I'd convinced myself he was, so he was my fourth. So I'm thinking you found one more.
Well, so
or possibly loads more.
No, well, I assumed that you'd got all 4 correct. So there's actually 2 more, and one from Torchwood, and then there's a few in the other episodes that I want to highlight. So Daniel Ryan, who played the crooked travel agent called Martin Bennett, he's Biff Kane in Midnight. He's the dad in Midnight.
Right.
And then this is the one that I didn't expect you to get because I didn't notice. Adam Shaw, who plays Derek, who's the informant that Mark Bonnar goes and leans on just for that one scene, and he breaks into his house and he goes, "How's your family?"
Yeah.
He played Morris in Rise of the Cybermen. He's one of the tramps that gets converted into a Cyberman early on in the episode.
Yeah, I'm not going to get that one.
So tiny part in this and tiny part in Doctor Who. Then the mum who was going to burn to death, who gets saved. She was in an episode of Torchwood in Series 2, so I did not recognise her, but apparently she was in Torchwood.
Is she the alien who's never been ill and makes her arm long?
It's the episode where Gwen gets pregnant on the night before her wedding.
Oh, right, yeah.
So I don't know.
She'll be a wedding guest. Yeah.
Yes. As far as the rest of the series goes, Pookie Quesnel, the delightfully named Pookie Quesnel, who plays the DCI, so their boss, who is sort of who knows that they've gone off to investigate. She was the captain in A Christmas Carol, apparently.
Oh, on board the big spaceship.
On board the spaceship. Also, I think was in Class, but I haven't watched Class, so I wouldn't know.
I tried. I really tried.
And then I'm going to rattle through these really quickly. Episode 2, you've got Jennifer Hennessy, who was married to Catman, played by Ardal O'Hanlon in Gridlock.
Right. The one with the kittens.
The
yes, that was
You've got Chris Finch, who plays the villain in episode 2. He was a Time Lord soldier, clearly a Mancunian Time Lord soldier in Day of the Doctor.
Fair enough.
Vaguely remember there being a Mancunian Time Lord soldier in that. And then there's a woman called Asha Kingsley, who was a WPC, who also appeared in The Woman Who Fell to Earth. I don't remember either of those roles. And then in episode 3, the intended victim who gets saved is Lucy Gaskell, who is married to Mark Bonnar.
Yeah.
Your Scottish man. Blink. Kathy Nightingale from Blink.
Ah.
The one who gets zapped and goes back to the 1920s.
Yes.
So she was married to Mark Bonnar. Still is married to Mark Bonnar. And she was the victim who gets saved. And then your other connection, Tamsin Outhwaite was married to Tom What's-His-Face, who went on to become Lucifer.
And was also
in the end of Time.
Yeah, but was Miranda's love interest in the TV series Miranda. Yeah, because the whole Lucifer thing messes with the Sandman chronology and Constantine, which is my area of expertise, and we'll come back to that another time. I really need the Constantine series on Blu-ray.
Yes. So that's your Doctor Who actors. You did very well. The fact that you spotted 3 of the 5
Mark
that you
Bonner's
could have spotted.
Just brilliant in everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is. Even if he is a weird plastic rebel flesh dude.
Yeah.
In Doctor Who. So,
yes,
that was Paradox. We both sort of recommend it, I think.
You know what? Yeah. It sounded better than those other 2 things that you found from the same period of time.
Yeah, no, like having kind of thought about, like, in context, when I picked up this on DVD with those, it was like, this was the one that kind of survived. It's your turn for March.
It is my birthday month, yes.
So we'll be recording that next February. Well, yeah, in February. For release in March. What are we going to be doing, Michael?
We are going right. Okay, so I won't bother with the backstory. I'll do that at the time. But if you want to do this in advance, it's free. It's on YouTube. There's at least 4 copies of it on YouTube to watch. It's called Harrison Bergeron. It's got Sean Astin, a Hobbit. It was a made-for-TV show from Showtime. It is about a almost futuristic America where everyone was made to be equal. And I don't want to say any more than that.
Written by Kurt Vonnegut. Apparently.
There's a Kurt Vonnegut short story, and the best of all, the short story is 2 pages long. It's tiny. It's tiny.
Oh, wow, the short story. I hadn't realised the short story was that short. Okay.
It's a very short story.
And are we talking a TV hour, or are we talking a full-length movie?
No, it's, I believe, hang on, I've written it down. No, I haven't. It was in my notes, which I've left at work. It's a full-length movie. I first found it on BBC One in about 12:30. When it was still broadcasting in standard def, because it was made in standard def.
4:3?
Sorry?
4:3 screen ratio as well, presumably?
Well, when I watched it, it was. Because I was watching it in the middle of the night.
Right.
Because it was released on VHS in 1998.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah.
And it was made in 1995. So
sort of Babylon 5 era. Are we talking kind of Babylon 5 style shooting and graphics and all that kind of stuff? Star Trek kind of?
It's cheaper,
or is it kind of lower budget than all those?
Cheaper than that. They spent their budget on the guest star.
Who's the guest star?
Well,
or is that a secret?
Well, no, it's fairly obvious. It's the bloke from The Sound of Music, who's also a Klingon. Mr.
Christopher Plummer.
It's Christopher Plummer, yeah.
Christopher Plummer. Okay,
and
so
when
Sean
Christopher
Astin
Plummer
is your lead.
died, a lot of people said this was one of his best performances. Like, it kept coming up.
He's very good, so I look forward to this. Yeah. So you will send me a YouTube link, hopefully, to the best quality version that's out there.
Yes.
Any listeners can... I mean, I guess we could potentially put a link to the YouTube thing in the show notes for this episode, so that you can all watch it. I
did a search to see if I could get you a copy, and then it just kept coming up. Like, it was available everywhere. It's as if everyone's just gone, sod it, it's yours. It was made by Showtime. I thought it was Canadian. It might be. I just don't know. I will know by next week. Well, next month takes time. You've got me saying next week. By next month.
And you can tell me why it is that you like it next time, and I will tell you if I enjoy watching it.
And you will tell me why you hated it. Okay.
I don't know. So far we've got 2 for 2-ish, that we've both enjoyed what the other has brought to the table.
Fair enough, yes.
I think.
Yes, and the listeners seem to be liking it, so good.
I have already decided what we're doing in April, which is my birthday month.
Excellent.
And I'm almost certain that you will have seen it before and that you will want to watch it and you'll enjoy it. But we will wait for next time before I spring that one on you.
Good.
So Harrison what? Harrison
Bergeron.
Bergeron.
Yes.
Okay. Harrison Bergeron. Okay.
And if you can't do that, type in Sean Astin and go for 1995 and it'll turn up.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
so with that.
So that was Paradox. So I will say goodbye and leave the final word, as ever, to Michael.
Be seeing you.